Hello, welcome again to Southend TV, where today we're asking you, particularly if you're a parent of children or teenagers, a straight question. Do you know what's going on when your children have the internet on? Well, here to help us today from South Essex College is Sarah Dorney. Sarah, welcome to Southend TV. And I know that you've been involved in looking at this serious problem for over 8 years. I think it's 8 years since you started a project with others.
Yeah, that's right. The project was initially a collaborative project with the local police and the council, so it was a three-party project. And the emphasis at the very beginning of the project was just focusing on bullying, because at the time there was more evidence that there was a lot of physical bullying maybe happening at home and in school.
You know, like traditional playground bullying, as we call it.
Yes, certainly. Yeah. As time has evolved and our technology has changed, that emphasis has certainly turned more into looking at cyberbullying and the world of technology and how we use it, and how sometimes some people are using it and abusing it.
So starting from there, can you help me, as a person who's only just stopped using a quill pen, as it were, what does the term cyberbullying actually infer?
Okay, well, cyberbullying is really looking at social media, which has a whole impact of different means. So it could be anything from a mobile phone to a computer to the gaming world, but it's really looking at that world and how others interact in quite a negative way, often to cause distress or to abuse others, and that can sometimes be just from messages, ongoing messages. But if somebody's actually feeling affected by receiving one of those messages, it has a really negative impact on their life and what they achieve and what they intend to do.
Is there any evidence to show particular age groups being affected by this?
To be honest, I observed, funny enough, last week in the local high street, youngsters as young as one having
really?
Mobile phones
or
using gaming devices. But I think at the moment the area that we're looking at in particular is kind of teenagers.
Yes.
Because they're under so much pressure. If we look at, for example, Facebook, to have so many friends, and that pressure of I've got 2,500 friends, and often they're accepting friends they don't even know. So just because somebody is saying, okay, I'm 14 years old, my hobby's football, that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is the true image of their intention. It could be that it's an elderly person, it could be that it's somebody that has other intentions, and I think the most important thing we need to do is to keep our young people at any age safe in whatever context, whether that's at home, school or socially around Southend.
Indeed. It never gets easy to be a parent. In fact, I think it gets harder these days. And I think we've all got to look at that situation, that parenting today is different to what it was yesterday and in bygone years. So if we look at parenting today, are there any signs that parents should look for and look to try and look after their own children in this particular area?
If the one thing, I mean, I'm not only a lecturer at South Essex College, but I'm also a parent.
Yes.
And the one thing that I've certainly started to do, not just from the start of this project, but also to start monitoring my children when they're using either a gaming device. My son is constantly on Xbox. Well, he was until I started monitoring. My daughter uses her mobile phone. It seems to be every waking hour. And I think sometimes youngsters are losing perspective of the real world, and they get kind of almost, I wouldn't say totally, I don't think the word world is addicted, but they're in a different generation to us when we were very much out with regards to how we would spend our time. Many hours are spending time maybe independently, looking at a social media or looking at a YouTube clip or looking at how many Facebook friends have contacted them. And I just think that parents need to monitor. They need to talk to their children about concerns. They need to also talk to them and say, be aware that sometimes if you get a Facebook request from somebody you don't know, don't just make the assumption that, oh, that's just another number to add to my account. You need to make sure that you are engaging in those conversations.
Are parents on their own in this, or are schools and colleges like your own doing things to point out the dangers and try and assist those who perhaps are suffering?
I think it has to be a whole community involved, and that is everyone, even with regards to this project. The police are involved, the council are involved, the education sector involved, young people, old people. It doesn't matter what age. It just means that as a community we have a sense of responsibility to educate our youngsters, but also keep them safe. And some youngsters, depending on their background, sometimes they might not have that supportive background at home where they are able to reflect or share their emotions. So often they might be using social media to actually release maybe some things that are going on at home in quite an unsafe context. So I think teachers have a responsibility. I think parents have a responsibility. I think young people have a responsibility to make sure that they are either blocking individuals that they don't know, that they are reporting events or worries to teachers, parents, the school, each other. Friends have a responsibility, because sometimes it might be that a friend talks to you and says, I'm really worried that I've had this come through, and it's making me feel worried. Sometimes your friends can be a really great first step, because then they can maybe encourage you to tell an adult who can be really proactive. Cyberbullying is actually against the law.
Yes.
And some children don't know that, and they don't always realise that when they put something out there, at the moment I've noticed that there's I don't like to use the word trend, but there's an awful lot of sexting happening in schools. And if that picture is sent, it can never be
recovered.
No, it can never be recovered.
Yeah.
And there's consequences to that. There's consequences of that young person feeling vulnerable, that young person maybe having issues to do with how they look at themselves. But also, 10 years' time, they go for a job, they go for an interview. Who knows who's going to pull that image back up? So you've just got to be careful.
You've talked about parents being aware. Can I turn it on its head?
Yeah.
And say, look, cyberbullying, it's like everything, it's a two-way street. What should parents do if they find or suspect that their child is actually not being bullied, but is a cyber bullier?
Okay, the one thing I would say first of all is you have to talk to them, and talk to them calmly. Obviously, from a parent's perspective, our first reaction sometimes to some of our children's actions is to get upset, because we're all human. We're all kind of trying to look after them. But I would say that they need to maybe go back to the school and contact. Most schools have a safeguarding or a PSE officer. And I think more than anything, sometimes if somebody is cyberbullying, there's normally a reason for it, and that reason could be vast. But I think that most importantly, they need to talk to the school and discover almost like an action plan to see how they can help that young person, and also break some of those unhealthy habits, because it's not great to, as a young person, be bullying in any form, and also for a young person receiving bullying. You know, both go hand in hand. They've got a dual sort of sense of responsibility.
I suppose your real message to parents is that there can be no room for complacency in this. I know some parents say, oh, it won't happen with my children because we block them the time they can use it. They can only use it such and such. But in that time that they allow them to use it, this can be going on under their noses without them necessarily knowing.
And I think the hardest thing as well is we've been into schools, and sometimes when we've been creating plays and performances based around, okay, maybe somebody has broken a friendship and they start cyberbullying a friend. We then go into the area of, is this cyberbullying or is this just banter? And there is a whole debate on this, because the hardest thing if somebody sends you something online, you don't know what the intent is. You don't know what the, they might have had the intention just to see it as a joke. However, that person receiving it will read it however they want to read it. And this is where it's very, very difficult. That sometimes when you address young people, they say, me, a cyberbully? No, never. It was just a bit of banter. I wasn't hurting anyone, it's just a few names. But the escalation of that is so much more. So young people do need to take responsibility for their actions as well.
Sarah, thank you so much for everything that you said. It's a lot for people to digest.
Yes, certainly it is.
But if you are watching, do digest and take from Sarah. If you're a parent, be aware. Don't be complacent. Let's all understand that progress is based on change. Not all change is progress. And in the world of the internet, there are plus factors and there are minus factors. As a parent, it's your job to make sure that the plus factors are the ones that your children get, but you keep the minus factors well away from them. Sarah, one thing comes to my mind. We've talked an awful lot this morning, today, about the role of parents. But what about children themselves? What about children informing people?
I think that's a really important message, that we are actually doing that at South Essex College. The young performers are young people, and it's those young people that are educating younger people about the issues and the dilemmas and the dangers of cyberbullying. That's where the strong voice is. That's where you are going to get people listening, because it would be all very easy for me to stand up and lecture them about the facts of cyberbullying. I guarantee they will fall asleep. But because we're instilling in them a very young approach to the performance aspect, and they're engaging in that, the young people are listening, and it's making them think about the choices they make, and make them be proactive in ensuring that they're using technology in a safe way. So I think it's everyone's responsibility.
Yes.
But I do think that sometimes that youngsters need to understand that if they are in a situation where they feel they cannot talk to anyone, the most important thing is they do need to report it, as hard as it may be. If it's to a teacher that they respect and feel comfortable talking to, if it's a friend, if it's a parent, if it's another sibling, a brother or sister, auntie, uncle, grandma, grandfather, they have to talk to someone. Because once you talk to someone, we can then help. But if you keep it to yourself, it's just going to escalate, and it's never going to...
You don't know how much I agree with you, because when I was between 5 and 6 at school, I was playing marbles, and one of my marbles bounced. It hit the classroom window and cracked it, and for 5 or 6 weeks I was bullied by one of the boys who was alongside, until I plucked up the courage to go to tell the teacher, I broke the window, this is what happened, and Alan Wood has been bullying me ever since.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that was the best thing I ever did. I hadn't told my mum, I hadn't told my dad, I didn't tell anybody, but when I told the teacher, she told the head teacher, and I got the sympathy, and they said Mr. Wood got really done. So I think what you've just said is absolutely key. If you're a child, or your child you think might be in this situation, encourage your children to do it. I'm sure we're going to talk about this subject a lot more, but from Southend TV, if there's any way or any story you have on this subject to tell us, please get in touch with us by email or by phone in any way you wish, because this is something that we are quite passionate about, and I believe quite rightly so. Thank you for watching.